My guest today, Maria Wheatley, is going to be sharing some secrets about Stonehenge with us. We'll be right back. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust, turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the show. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team here in Sacramento, California. We're based out of Sacramento, and but we do have 45 people up and down the state of California, which is kind of cool. Which means we can get to you. The issue with California, though, is that California is a bigger state than people think. You know, and I know when you think of California, you kind of think of like Hawaii. You know, because the California girls and the beaches, and we do have that. But we also have mountain regions. We have desert regions. We have a lot of agriculture areas, mountains, everything you can think of. And that's why it may take us a couple of days to get you, no matter where I have team members located. But in the case that happens, I do have psychics on staff who can call you to consult with you beforehand. And what that does is, if it is something paranormal, then they can, in most cases, they can settle down the energy of whatever's going on until we can get out there. But usually, it doesn't take more than 1 or 2 days for us to respond to a case. So if you think that fits with what you need and you think you have a need, please feel free to Google California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team or Google California Haunts Radio for that matter. And you can find us that way. All right? That being said, let me do this real quick. Make sure. Okay. I want to make sure I'm not on the mic somewhere. Okay. That being said, you never know how these settings go. Every time I start this thing up, the settings are different. So I want to make sure everything's where it's supposed to be. Yep. Give me a second really quick here. Because sometimes they will switch. On me. Okay, we're good. All right. Okay, now I'm back. That being said, if you are watching from Facebook, and you like what you see today, or you like what you hear today, please feel free to hit that follow button. We're always looking for followers. Also, show me some love. Leave me a thumbs up, happy face, happy heart thing I can never do, because that really helps us out. And be in the chat room amongst yourselves. Okay? Same thing with YouTube. We have over 900 videos sitting over at YouTube, all of this show. I'm a journalist, photojournalist, so I like to change it up a lot. Okay? I don't like to always have paranormal stuff that I'm covering. I like to cover other stories. Last night was the mob in Hollywood as an example. And there are folders over there so you can find stuff and find your favorite interviewees easier. So check that page out. I'm also very active in the community portion of YouTube as well. That's youtube.com/@CaliforniaHauntsRadio. Okay? Same thing. If you hit that like button, hit those smileys, what that does is that puts us up higher in the FYP. And what the FYP does is it's part of the master computers at the social media sites. They all work the same. So the more likes you give us, the more comments you give us in the chat room, the higher, the more they're going to distribute us out to others. And get the word out on the show. And by the way, you guys have done a great job getting the word out on the show. I can tell you that. Okay? All right. Business. I am recruiting for new team members, and if you're interested, you live in up and down California area, Northern Cal, I'm going to be setting that up on Meetup later today, and I teach a very intense course before you even are considered for the team. If I teach the course and you like what you see, then you can join up. But at that point, up until that point, it's a very intensive course. So I will be posting that up on the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team Meetup. Okay, let's get on with our guests. I was in England many, many years ago, and we did get to go to Stonehenge. Stonehenge is Stonehenge. You can't get close to it anymore. But, it was a heck of an experience to see it. And I'm really excited to talk to my next guest, Maria Wheatley, about Stonehenge. She's done a lot of research into it, and, well, you know what? I'll let her tell her story. Let me bring her in. Hello.
Hi, Charlotte. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you for coming on. Tell me about you.
Well, I'm a research author and an investigator of different ancient sites across the world, from Stonehenge to Egypt. I'm a dowser, and I've dowsed so many ancient sites now in 16 different countries, including sacred sites of America, such as Chaco Canyon and Valley of the Ancients. And so, yes, I love ancient sites, and more than that, I discovered aspects about lost civilizations as well.
When you were talking about American sites, have you had the chance to go to America's Stonehenge?
I know Dennis Stoner very well in communications, but no, I haven't been there. I focused on the Four Corners region of the huge buildings that were once there. One was about 4 stories high. It was the highest building in ancient America before Chicago and New York put up their skyscrapers. So, yeah, that's been my focus at this moment in time. But I do
That's cool.
plan to go there next year.
Absolutely. So tell me about Stonehenge. I know there's the stuff that we see on Discovery Channel, about it, but I know because I heard you on the other show, you found some really cool stuff there. So tell me all about Stonehenge.
We all think we know Stonehenge because it's iconic, and we see images of it all over the internet and in books, on documentaries. So, yes, we think that we know it. But when I started to research it deeper, one of the first things that I discovered about the area going back 5,500 years ago, and that's Orthodox dating, then the first thing I discovered that was unusual about the Stonehenge area is that the people had long skulls, like elongated skulls. And I went to Cambridge, sorry, and I went to Cambridge and photographed some of the skulls there to prove that they did exist. And then when I started looking at Stonehenge itself, I realized that the model of Stonehenge was based on a 17th century, around about 1725, when an antiquarian called William Stukeley visited the site and said, "This is what I think it looks like. This is what it should look like." And I just investigated it and realized that there was some amazing stones there that have been written out of the history books.
Very interesting. And when you look at Stonehenge, what do you see as opposed to what we see?
Well, I'm into the earth energies and the lays as well. So for me, it's not just what you can see, it's what you can't see at places at Stonehenge. And also what you don't see, and what National Geographical will never show you, is that Stonehenge is surrounded by 16 military establishments. And it's on
Really?
and it's on the edge of what I liken to Area 51 in Nevada, because just literally a mile or so outside of Stonehenge, the military own that land, and it is a no-go area for civilians, just like Area 51.
Oh my gosh, that's true. I never knew that. I had no idea. Let's talk about the elongated skulls now, because obviously that was a thing for a long time. For people to do that, there's still cultures that do that, in a way. Why do you think it was in England in particular? Because you never hear about that really in England.
No, it wasn't until I started investigating particular barrows that I brought the elongated skulls to the attention of the British public, and indeed the world, through radio shows such as yourself. So what they were back again in the Neolithic, 5,500 years ago, if you imagine that you have a natural long skull, you had a natural long skull, but they did extend that. The elite, the rulers, the priesthood, they extended their long skulls through boarding and what's called cranial deformation. But there is a natural long skull type. So it was almost like the rulers and the kings and the queens, and probably the high priestesses and the high priests, they were the ones that elongated them. So really there's two types of long skull people that were living in the Neolithic. When I measured their femur bone, once you have a femur bone, you can anticipate the height of a person, as the police and anthropologists know well. then they were quite short. The women were about 4'9", and the men were no more on average than 5'4". Yet they moved the heaviest stones to create places like Stonehenge and many other stone circles besides.
Now, when we talk about elongated skulls, I know this. I've never had kids, but I know this from my nieces and nephews and what my mother would say about the baby's head being soft. Because I mean, when the baby's laying in the bassinet, you want to rotate the head and keep it moving. Is that when they did this to make the skulls longer? Is when the cranium was soft like that?
Exactly. When a baby and a young child has the sutures haven't fused together, making it hard. It's in a way it's pliable, and if you apply certain bandages or board into it, it will leave scars along this part of the skull. So anthropologists can identify if there has been cranial deformation, conducted. But yes, I think they were literally trying to look a little bit different to the average person, like saying, look at me, I look at a little bit different. And they certainly did build Stonehenge, and
Right.
but then later there were other types of humans, and I think they've been written out of the history books, because even though I went to Oxford and photographed them, they're still not widely known. You've got a few professors talking about them now, because I've been talking about them for some time, but mainly they don't fit in with the history, so let's not talk about them.
Right. Now let's talk about building Stonehenge. Now, like you said, these people were more than 5'4". How did they move those rocks? Do you have any idea?
Well, I do have a theory, and it's to do with earth energies, but theories abound, and the most from levitation to any underground water flowing them down. I mean, there's many different interpretations, but when I was with the team and we were measuring what's called earth currents, just imagine like you've got a surface river that flows and meanders. You've got that in earth energy, so just imagine like a river of energy, to see what an earth current means. And when we measured that at the center, it was around about 25 hertz. Now, if the ancients could manipulate earth currents, and if indeed they could, and they made that to 25 kilohertz in the center of an earth energy band, then that's the frequency of levitation. So it is a theory. I can't prove that the ancients did that, but I do think they were far more in touch with the earth than what we are today.
And what was Stonehenge used for, do you think?
Oh, again, your theories abound. So what I think it was being used for, yes, it is an astronomical calendrical site. It is a calendar. It measures not just the sunrise at the summer solstice, but more accurately the winter solstice sunset, and also very long cycles of the moon called the moon's metonic cycle. Every 18.61 years, the moon would rise above the tapering crest of the hailstone. But that's it in one, guys. An ancient site is like a diamond. It's multifaceted. It's not just one thing. And if we look to how the ancients recorded Stonehenge, and we turn to the 12th century with a scholar called Geoffrey of Monmouth, who wrote The History of the Kings of Britain. It's a very famous book if you're a Brit. It really is, because Geoffrey of Monmouth recorded King Arthur, Merlin, all of those myths. That's what he said was the holy history of this land, including King Brutus, King Belinus, and many others, just other than Arthur. And he said that no stone at Stonehenge doth not have healing power, and that people would go there for healing. Today, we've got Professor Tim DeVille of Southampton University, and he claims that he does also think it's a healing centre and people went there for healing. So yes, I think it was a very, very profound healing centre. But then there was another legend going back hundreds of years about Stonehenge, and saying that it was an oracle center, that if you went to the central stones and you asked questions like you would at an oracle at Delphi in Greece, you could get answers back. So I think it was a combination of maybe healing and oracle center that was renowned through Britain. And it wasn't just Geoffrey of Monmouth that recorded it as a healing temple. There were many others besides. John Aubrey, an antiquarian, William of Malmesbury, lots of others.
Did did Stonehenge contain altars or anything like that? Were they doing rituals out there?
Oh, yes, I think they were definitely doing ceremonies at Stonehenge at particular times of the year. To the ancient Celts, it's still celebrated today in modern Druidry. You have 8 sacred days of the year, 8 Sabbaths of the year, the solstices, the equinoxes, and Beltane, and other dates besides. And they would probably be the times when people went to these incredible ancient sites.
You've told during that other interview that I heard you on, you spoke of a missing altar.
Yes, I mean, again, if you go back to where do people today get their information from about Stonehenge, you go back to one person. It's not a cold case. It's easy to do. You go back there. And it's William Stukeley writing in 1724. But let's go back to an earlier time. We go back to a time when there was a king of England called King James I of England. And he was digging at the center of Stonehenge alongside the Duke of Buckingham, which was his lover at the time. And his royal architect was there called Inigo Jones. And Inigo Jones is famous in London. He designed the banqueting house. It's a famous place in London and many other places as well. And they claimed that when they were digging, the first people ever to dig at Stonehenge, they found a second altar stone. English Heritage and National Geographical and all of that type of authorities who claim they're an authority say there's just one altar stone. But no, there were definitely 2. And Inigo Jones, the respected royal architect of London and England at that time, he even told us where they took it. They stole it and they carted it away on horse and cart. I mean, like carted it away on a horse and cart to St. James's Palace in London. So the king stole it. And the St. James's Palace, I would imagine in California and places, you're thinking, well, what relevance does St. James's Palace have? Before Buckingham Palace was built, that was the royal residence. You see, so they definitely had that stone, probably because it was healing. King James I had quite a few ailments. For example, he had very weak legs. He couldn't stand for a long time. He had a much larger tongue than is normal. So he also had eating issues. And he wasn't really a very attractive king. And he wasn't really, he had ailments. And I think because Stonehenge was renowned for healing, they took it to the Royal Palace in London so that the Duke of Buckingham, who him and his mother were occultists, they probably performed rituals for the King of England, who ironically wrote the best-selling book ever, King James, the version of the Bible. It's still the best-selling book in the world, King James version of the Bible.
Do you think that they're ever going to find that altar, or do you think it's been long gone by now, or did the royal family bury it somewhere?
That's a really good question, because I was reading the last person that tried to locate the altar stone, and that was in 1930 by an archaeologist called William Cunnington Jr. And he was the last person. He wrote to St. James's Palace basically saying, where's the stone? Can we have it back? And the royal door was closed firmly in his face. And the only other person to have asked since then is me. I've asked, is it there? I haven't had a reply. That said, but I do await with interest should the palace get in touch.
Now, when you talk about the skeletons that were found with the elongated skulls, how close was that to Stonehenge? Was it at Stonehenge, or was it a little further away?
Oh yeah, very close. All of the what's called a long barrow, and a long barrow is a bit like America's Stonehenge. They're chambers, and so if any listener knows that, if they don't, imagine just a long mound with a small megalithic chamber, and the skull and some skeletons were put into these chambers, all of them across the British Isles, not just at Stonehenge, had elongated skulls. And the ADNA, meaning ancient DNA, has been looked at with the Neolithic. And intriguingly, their heyday was, from about 3000 BC to 2500 BC. But around that time of 2500 BC, you had much, much taller people coming in across Europe called the beaker culture. They had round skulls, not long skulls. And they seem to have had, issues with one another. They didn't mix for 500 years, according to the ADNA samples. But then there was a tipping point and they did start intermarrying, having children. And then the long skull DNA, it's believed, was then wiped out. It was eradicated.
Absolutely. When you look at this history, why do you think Stonehenge was built? I mean, let's be honest about this. Was it because it lines up obviously with the stars and moon and all this? But I mean, and you mentioned healing. But and I know you weren't there, so it's speculation all the way through. But what do you think was the main reason to build this thing?
The main reason, I think, was the location. The ancient sites such as the pyramids of Giza, the Great Pyramid of Fame, and Stonehenge, and some large stone circles in the British Isles are always placed above huge, deep aquifers that generate a lot of energy, for example, and they have a lot of earth currents, ley lines, and numerous different types of energy. That's what makes a power place. It's not just a crossing of lays or something. You need all of that energy. Then once you put a standing stone into that energy field, a bit like acupuncture, when a needle goes into the meridian line, so to speak, then that becomes completely activated. And we've proved that if you put a standing stone into earth energy and you measure its Hertzian frequency, then we've got that. We've proved that. And I've written many articles and lectures worldwide on that. So we know it's like activating. So for me, if people say, well, what's the most special thing about Stonehenge? It's what's beneath the ground. That's what matters. And plus, when you think about it, it's an engineering nightmare because Stonehenge is on a slope. So some of the stones had to go in deeper than the other. Do you see what I mean? To make them flat on the top of equal height so that they could put the lintelled ring on top of the stone circle. So if you were going to say, where's the easiest place to build Stonehenge? It's not going to be there. Yet the earth energies decreed that should be standing where it is today.
Now, when you did research on this, were you allowed to go in, physically go near the rocks and all that? Because I know nowadays you can't even get close.
You can't get close on public access, but you can get close on private access. You can book in. It's a bit like before office hours and after office hours. You can have private access. It is very expensive. It is expensive, but it's certainly worth it. You will go in with a group of around 30 people. So, you could book in, I could book a group in, etc. And then you experience the stones from the inside. And some of the stones were highly unusual that have been defaced by the then Ministry of Works. So I think Stonehenge, in about the 1930s and 40s, people had a different experience there than they do today.
Now it brings me to my next question, because like you like to work with energies. Is there a certain energy when you're able to get close in there? Is there a certain energy coming off the area?
Well, yes. I mean, one of the stones now is recumbent. That means it's falling down, and so it's lying flat on the ground. Originally, it would have been upright. And I call that the spine stone because it literally has a ridge going down the stone that looks like a spine, just like your spine. It's quite intriguing. And when I've taken people there over decades now, and I say to people, if it's cold there, take off your glove and just go with your hand down the spine stone, you'll feel a hot spot. And some people put their eyes in the air to begin with and go, really, Maria? And I go, give it a go. And then they feel the heat coming out of the stone. I even got a security guard, because you're not allowed to touch the stones. And he came sort of marching over and said, what are you doing? Are you touching the stone? No. And I said, we're feeling for the heat. And he went, yeah. And I said, just give it a go. Just give it a go. And he gave it a go. And he went, oh my God, I've been here as a security guard for years, and I never knew that stone emitted heat. It is quite pronounced.
Oh, when I think of you talking about water running underneath and stuff, because we have a lot of caves here. We have a lot of towns where houses are built over cave systems. And there is a lot of paranormal activity because you got the limestone and you got the water, rushing through there, which is going to create EMF. Is that what might be going on there? Because you talk about the water underneath. So maybe there's limestone or something under there that would be causing this energy?
It's not limestone, but it's very similar. Limestone is porous, and that's what the Giza Plateau of Egypt's on, a huge block of limestone. Here in Wiltshire, it's on chalk bedrock. But the two are very similar. They're very, very porous. And it was a master dowser called Tom Lethbridge that did a lot of investigation into underground water, paranormal activity, and he claimed that water, like homeopaths say, can retain memory, for example, and therefore they almost have like a recording if there's a trauma, death, or there's kind of an impact into that area. And certainly at Stonehenge, a lot of people have a corner of the eye experience, where you feel that you've got a glinting image, or you're feeling that you're being overlooked at these sites. And even in our mythology, where we have our round mounds dating back to 4,500 years ago, that people were buried beneath and a mound placed on top. Some of them are huge. You have great mounds, like the Toltec mounds in Arkansas, and many others besides. And these mounds, they're always associated with the Fae, or fairy, as it's been known in some parts. We call them the Fae. And so they have this kind of mythology about them. You don't mess with the Fae in the mounds. That's their territory. Best leave alone. And those that don't and kind of have a mockery, then sometimes ill luck falls upon them.
Let's talk about your dowsing a little bit, because I use dowsing rods as well. But when you go to apply them to a place like Stonehenge, what kind of results do you get when you're out there?
Well, if you're looking for earth currents, for example, you're going to get a huge reaction, like bang, really, really fast, to be the found position, for example, when the rods cross or one rod comes in, and you can really feel that the energy coming out of the ground. If you imagine that at the near center of Stonehenge, where the altar stones were placed upright, they're on a huge spiral earth energy pattern, which is the energy pattern of an aquifer, a very, very deep aquifer, and it's in old esoteric water divining lore. And if you're above that spiral energy, it's a bit like a vortex, not like the ones at Sedona at all, very different to that type of vortex energy. But nonetheless, it's there, and it's very, very powerful. Other paranormal activity happens around Stonehenge that has been photographed. UFOs are often photographed above there. People have had missing time. Military people have had missing time at roundabout Stonehenge when they left barracks. You've only got a barracks about 1.5 miles away, and two serving army officers were having just a couple of tins of beer and a cigarette. And before they knew it, they went back to barracks, and then they were under military arrest because they'd been missing for 2 days without leave. And they said, we've only been for a couple of beers, literally in the car. But they did see these strange lights, like amber-colored lights going round. So we know that Stonehenge is a magnet for different types of extraordinary behavior, from the skies to the earth. It's a real magnet for it. And when you go close to the stones, this might have been your experience, for example, Charlotte, where you go close to the stones and you feel its energy field. And some people just go close with their hands like this. You don't need dowsing rods at Stonehenge because it's that powerful. You go towards the stones, and it's almost like you feel bump, you've hit something, if that makes any sense. And it's almost like it's the energy field of the stone coming out towards you, and you can walk into that energy field. And so many people, time and again, tell me that they felt that when I put them in the right position, just say, walk a little bit forward now, and you tell me what you feel. And they go, oh my God, it's like hitting an energy field.
Now, my next question, that kind of leads into my next question. Do you think, for people to build this thing, to have all that energy and all that going on, do you think there might have been some alien help with that at all?
It's intriguing to go down different avenues. It really is, because I'm very open-minded to lots of different interpretations. But what I did notice on the axis line of Stonehenge, and that's like the summer solstice, winter solstice line that goes through the middle of Stonehenge. And if you just project that line out into the landscape, it's called an axis line. And on that axis line of the rising sun at midsummer, there was a very, very unusual burial that was reported there by antiquarians of hundreds of years ago. And they described a very strange, it was either going to be a very disabled person or it's going to be something out of this world. And they said the eyes were on top of the head, a bit like how Lloyd Pye describes his Star Child, for example, of United States fame. He said the eyes were like on top of the head, and they're describing this being, if you will, and it's got a tail as well. They said it had a tail, and they really did shock the kind of early archaeologists called antiquarians. But not only that, you had long-skulled people around this unusual being that were almost huddled and surrounding it, and that is unprecedented. You don't have that burial anywhere else in the British Isles at all. So that was something very, very unusual. So what was that burial? Was it something that could tell us about, out of this world? Was it something, quite tragic with a human being? We don't know, because what the antiquarians did, they were so shocked by this burial and what they found, they left them all in situ and packed them in. So they're still there if archaeologists wanted to re-excavate them.
Now, I was just thinking about the energy you talk about, because to me, doing in the work that I do, the work that you do as well, I mean, if you're not grounded walking into that energy, it's going to wipe you out.
It's like, absolutely. I mean, I agree, because even if you go to the pyramids of Giza or a temple of one of the Nile's temples, unless you are, focused and grounded, you're just going to go zoomph. You're just going to go up. And also, I mean, I got taught by Master Dowsers all over the world, Chinese geomants, European Master Dowsers, and a Catholic dowser actually from Italy that was, very, very learned. He told me that before the bishop goes into the church, he stands on what they call the neutral zone. And the neutral zone is a place where it literally is a bit like a kind of energy coming out of the ground, and it clears your aura so that you're clear. You're not taking your emotional baggage into a sacred site. And when I was told that, I was thinking, well, I wonder if Egypt has that. I wonder if Stonehenge has that neutral zone and other sites as well. And yes, they do. So I think it's you're right. It's about grounding and being focused. And then if we clear ourselves within these energy fields, and then we go into a site, we're kind of more receptive and open. And like I said, you don't take your emotional baggage in there. And we've all got stuff going on in our lives.
It's kind of like a Catholic exorcist before he goes in to do an exorcism on somebody, where they have to fast and be alone for so many days beforehand in order to prepare to do it.
Yes, and to some regard, I think that's what was going on in the ancient world. They were in altered state of consciousness, and I think the energy of a site it definitely changes you. I mean, I've taken people from all over the world to Stonehenge and Avebury and Egypt and numerous places, and most of them say they go back a different person. These places are power places. They were chosen by our ancestors because of all of the earth energies, all of the ley lines, all of the grid lines. List goes on and on. But they do change you. They do, and that's what I think is so powerful about ancient sites. Is they've stood for all of those thousands of years, and they're still changing people's lives.
Now, the other question I had about Stonehenge, when you're able to get access in there, have you seen anything? Because I know obviously you're a dowser, but but when you're in there, I'm sure there's ancients all over the place. Do they ever make themselves seen at all?
Oh, I believe so. I mean, I really do think that when I first discovered the elongated skull outside of the Stonehenge area, it was a woman for one as well. And you don't normally hear about prehistoric women. Even if you look at English heritage, who built Stonehenge, they're men.
Right.
You look at who's polishing the stones, they're men. So I felt a real connection when I met this woman, the skull in Cambridge University. And I really felt her presence when I'm at ancient sites. And again, you have these corner of the eye experiences at ancient sites as well. And I have really felt her guidance. And then, when I feel her guidance, I think, okay, I'm being guided in that direction. Next minute, I've discovered something else about an ancient site. So, yes, I really do feel that the ancestors are close. And the veil is thinnest at these places. The veil between this world and the next is exceptionally thin.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What fascinates you the most about the site?
It's lost history and it's forbidden history. So, for example, if you imagine that Stonehenge has got those 30 stones with the lintels on top, creating a perfect circle, inside of which there were apparently 5 great trilithons. And a trilithon for listeners is 2 stones with a stone on top. So it's a setting of 3 stones, 2 with 1 on top. It's called a trilithon. And there's, at the center of Stonehenge, you have these trilithons and then the 2 altar stones. Well, prior to the 1950s, there was a curator of the site called Tom Gorey. He was widely respected. He was the custodian of the site. He was a guide to the site. He knew Stonehenge like the back of his hand. And he said that from one of the stones, and if I say the number, anyone can look up where it is at Stonehenge. It's called Stone 51, Trilithon 51. On the outside of that stone, you have, for instance, you did have a 2-foot hole going into the stone. So you could put your hand down into the stone. And Tom Gorey, the custodian, always said, no matter what the weather was, whether it was a drought, whether it was a sunny day, when your back was turned, that hole used to fill up with fresh water, almost miraculously. And he constantly reported on this, and it got known. Oh, if you put it on your skin and you've got eczema, it will help with the eczema. And if and people were starting to queue with ailments, and he was writing this down. And then the Ministry of Works, which was a government department, today it's called English Heritage or Historic England, that managed Stonehenge. But back in that era of the 40s and the 50s, it was a government department, the Ministry of Works. Well, the Ministry of Works got wind of this story and people and healing, and they decided that that was not going to be the case. And they plugged it up with plastic and concrete. So that whole place is plugged up. But you still can see where the water has run off, for millennia, because it's got runoff water grooves on it. So that's a lost history of Stonehenge, which is saying, how that water was produced, nobody knew. They tried to figure it out then, and nobody knew how. But that's just one part of Stonehenge where I think it's been lost. And it was written out of all the guidebooks, you see, because people thought, no, we don't want to say we've plugged it up with concrete and plastic.
Right.
it doesn't look good for a government body. So it was like just hushed over and then forgotten about as time went on.
The other question I have too, and I was just thinking about this, with with the stones being on top of the ground. I mean, over the centuries, the ground has the ground has come up. So do you guys think that there's stuff underneath Stonehenge yet?
The LiDAR has been done all over Stonehenge, and LiDAR is like a beam of light coming down to some regard, and it can go beneath sand to find lost cities in Egypt. It can go through trees in places like the Amazon to find lost cities there. And so the LiDAR has been done, and there is one buried stone at Stonehenge. But one thing that a lot of people don't realize about Stonehenge, they're not in the earth. You've only got that much earth in this landscape, and the rest is solid chalk bedrock. So imagine the stones go into socket holes in chalk. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's what keeps them upright for all of these years. And also a bit like limestone, you were talking about that's in your environment.
Right.
They're highly conductive materials. So if you've got any kind of magnetism around chalk, it's thought of that will enhance that stone in its socket. And the blue stones that came from Wales, about 120, 140 miles away, a very beautiful Welsh stone. They were the smaller stones on the inside of Stonehenge. Well, they're 3 times more magnetic than any other stone in the British Isles. And they were carted for, or transported, how is a mystery, 140 miles to be erected at Stonehenge. So the place is a lot of electromagnetic energy.
I was just thinking that when you said that, I find it amazing. I just find the whole thing amazing that they were able to get these stones there in the first place, and like you say, digging down into the chalk to make the to make the areas to stick them down into.
Absolutely. I mean, this is solid chalk bedrock. And if you look for the archaeological model of, well, how did they dig out a big henge? So today we see Stonehenge exposed. You see the stones. But if we go back to its era and we look at what was surrounding Stonehenge, imagine this. It was rather a 6 foot or maybe even 10 foot massive white chalk bank that made it a very secretive place. You could not see what was going on the inside of Stonehenge. Today, that has been ploughed over, dug out, so they're only about 2 feet high, the henge bank, but it was concealed in chalk. And once you have a monument concealed so much like that, you have intense acoustic properties as well on the inside of that monument, which the University of Reading have done a lot of experiments about. So we know that it was this highly secretive place. So if I was walking up to Stonehenge today, I would only see the tops of the tallest stones. That's all. And I like to remind people of what it was like for our ancestors to witness Stonehenge, rather than what we see from photo shots on the internet, which has it all exposed.
Very interesting. Another question I have along this line. I mean, have you found tools or anything like that would tell you how they were able to hammer those slots in, or however they might have done it?
Archaeologists inform us that how they dug out the henge bank to make that big 10-foot bank alone, over 800 feet wide, the henge. Stonehenge itself is about 108 feet across, but the actual big henge bank is 800 feet across. So that's huge. And they inform us that it was antlers that they prized out the chalk with. But recently, I mean, you'd have to have a lot of antlers, but recently they've put some of those antlers under a very intense microscope. To look for breakage patterns and things like that. And what did they find? That they were never used as tools. They were probably ceremonial headwear or ceremonial artifacts because they were polished. They showed no sign of wear and tear. So how that henge bank was forged out of that solid chalk bedrock, that alone is a mystery.
Absolutely. Now, my other question is, when we think of spaces with altars, we tend to think of South America, we tend to think of the Mayans, and we tend to think of the Aztecs. Was there human sacrifice, or is there evidence that there was any kind of human sacrifice going on?
No, because the altar stones were upright. It was in 1666 that John Aubrey, he was a very posh antiquarian, riding around with King Charles I, and he was naming these things. Yeah, he said, "Oh, it's the altar stone. It's the slaughter stone at Stonehenge." But originally they were upright rather than like a flat altar, so to speak. And there's no evidence of sacrifice at Stonehenge. The only time, and it was very late in its history, you had someone that was murdered by shooting arrows in their back that were placed into the henge bank I've just described. That's the only one to date. That's not to say the lack of evidence is no evidence. I mean, you further down the line, you might have an archaeological dig and discover something that's never before been discovered. So again, I think, it's about keeping an open mind and being receptive to possibilities. And it's a quantum universe we live in with numerous types of possibilities.
Now, the other question that I've been thinking about too is, you found these bodies, these skeletons with the elongated skulls. Were people living around this area for at Stonehenge, or was it a case where it was a place where they would come to visit?
That's a really good question, and absolutely, it was sacred. It was a temple. And interestingly, in the archaeological record, if you walk down the high street in London, you would find rubbish on the floor, like it or not. But nobody dropped anything at Stonehenge. It was like, that's sacred. You didn't even take that much inside of Stonehenge. It's called a clean archaeological site. So we know that it was deemed sacred, like I said, maybe for healing, for an oracle. But just outside of Stonehenge, about a mile or so away, you have what's called Durrington Walls. And Durrington Walls was a henge. It had a ditch and a bank, a bit like what I've described. And inside of which, that's where they lived. That's where they had feasts and festivals. And you find lots of they loved pork. Now, they certainly weren't kosher at Stonehenge, because they were slaughtering a lot of pigs at midwinter, because in the pits, the midden pits, you find enormous amounts of pig bone. And they had a sweet tooth because they fed the little pigs on honey to make the meat very sweet.
Interesting. I just did a thing over the holidays. I actually did a history of Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And the food. Not so much Thanksgiving, but the food that we eat during holidays. And I was able to go back in my research back to even the 1700s in England, about what they were eating. And when you mentioned pork is huge. Even when I was in Europe, when I was a kid, there was hardly any beef. I mean, you go get a burger, in Europe, and it would be a pork burger.
Yeah, and to some respect here, that is the case now. You have hamburgers, and you do have a lot of pork. We even have, when you make this, I don't particularly like it, but when you have the skin all crisp, they're called pork scratchings, and you're eating pig skin in effect. I mean, it's never appealed to me, but my family certainly, like that. And yes, I think, that when we look at Durrington Walls, that's where they were eating and feasting and dropping things. They found a lot of beer being brewed as well. So they had alcohol in the Neolithic as well, and very fruity beverages. Like you have, I don't know if you have it in the States, we have a drink called cider made from apples, and it's quite high in alcohol. They seem to have been having alcohol as well. But more than that, if you imagine that the priesthood and the priestesshood, they had a bit like what you have in Catholic churches, censors where they're swinging and the incense comes out and it fills the church with beautiful scent. at Stonehenge in the late Bronze Age, they had these censers, but they were full of opiates because
Of
they've been
course.
analyzed. So they were definitely in an altered state of consciousness. The priesthood were, they could have been really going into these profound states of consciousness for, oracles or for whatever they were doing. And they dressed very finely. They had beautiful gold trestles for their hair. They had amber breastplates coming down that were imported from Estonia, for example. They loved black jewelry. They had jet, which is black. It's a
Hmm.
indigenous stone that you can make into jewelry in England. And they had dramatic black jewelry as well. So, and gold buttons. They were the kings of bling as well at Stonehenge. Seriously, when the antiquarians struck gold, they struck gold and they struck amber. And really it was quite fascinating, all of the jewelry finds. So yes, they were in their finery at Stonehenge.
This isn't kind of related, but it is kind of related when you talk about opioids. Because when like I said, I was there 8, 9, 10 years old, young kid, over in
Yeah.
Hungary because my family's Hungarian, and we would be walking down different streets, and they would have their baby carriages just parked on the street, and the women would be shopping. The babies were in the carriages, all nice and quiet, no crying, no nothing. And my father asked this lady and said, "I don't get it. These kids are all so quiet." And that's when she told him that's because they would melt down poppy seed oil from poppies, and they would put it on the
Ah,
end of the nipple thing and give it to the kids.
right.
So I
Yes.
don't know if they still do it, but I guess the babies were in a dreamlike state. You know what it is, That's why when you talk about them using the opioids, with Stonehenge, it makes sense. It's passed down from all those generations that they're still
And,
doing stuff like that.
And that's interesting that you should say that, actually, because they were coming across from Europe. They were
Hmm.
trading opiates across from Europe to obviously get to the British Isles. It had to be imported. Is what they found through matching seeds in other parts of Europe, basically. And you get a jigsaw and it fits. Yeah, so I think they were in a definite state of consciousness as well. And you also had like a shamanic cult. So you had this very finery priestesshood and priesthood, and then you also had the shamanic types there, which were more wearing, like I mentioned earlier, the antlers, and they had boars' tusks, like teeth, with holes in sewn onto fringes at the bottom of cloaks. So when they moved or danced, there was a lot of clattering going along as well. I think in the Neolithic, it was quite a time of drama as well, because some of the alignments that were put into some stone circles are immense theatre. For example, we're going to go to Callanish. It's on the Western Isles of Scotland in a place called the Outer Hebrides. So imagine a little island off the west coast of Scotland, and it's got one of those beautiful stone circles that graces the United Kingdom. It's got a circle with an avenue and an avenue. Kind of looks like a Celtic cross, sort
Hmm.
of, to get a visual going, okay? And it's coming up to the cycle of the moon's most southerly moonrise, which only happens every 18.61 years. And at Callanish, at this stone circle, you've got an outlying mountain range, intriguingly looking like a woman lying on her back with her breast and her belly and her legs. And the moon dips in and out. And it's so low because it's not rising at its normal height. It's at its most southerly in this 18.61 year cycle, and it skims the body of the sleeping beauty, as she's called. Then it turns around in the middle of the stone circle as it's about to set. Do you see what I mean? It's kind of moved around naturally. And if a woman, and this was calculated by the fantastic late Margaret Curtis, and I must give a shout out for Margaret for discovering this. And I met Margaret at the last cycle, had the grace of doing that. And she calculated that if a woman just with outstretched arms like this, the moon was so low and so honey colored, she'd be touching either side of the moon. It's that low. But the atmospherics don't stop there. If she kind of moved her hands together and forward, then her shadow in the moon touches all of the participants in front of her, and then bang, it goes jet black because the moon suddenly drops. So I think a lot of these lunar events and places were like Neolithic drama for people to see. Imagining seeing somebody's shadow figure in the moon. And it must have been quite something. And I'll be taking people to Callanish next year to see that event. It is astonishing.
Fascinating. I would love to see that. Now, Stonehenge isn't the only like Stonehenge over there. I thought I heard you mention that if people want to get up close and personal, because you can't get up close to Stonehenge, but there's other places that you can, right, over in England.
Yes, you don't have to pay. You can have private access to Stonehenge, but it is expensive. Now, if you're just 17 miles to the north of Stonehenge, and it's literally quite close to where I live, you have the world's largest stone circle called Avebury Henge, or Avebury, as some Americans pronounce it. We say Avebury. I've noticed your dialect says Avebury. Either way, it's a huge stone circle. Stonehenge is 108 feet in diameter. Avebury's large stone circle is 1,088 feet in diameter. So you can fit 10 Stonehenges into that great stone circle, inside of which at Avebury you have 2 more stone circles. So the outer stone circle, the largest in the world, has 100, well, they did have 100 standing stones surrounding it in a perfect circle. And the 2 stone circles on the inside had roughly about 30 standing stones. And then it had avenues 1.5 miles long containing pairs of stones, like a processional way, that contained 200 stones each. Okay. Wow. So you've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stones at Avebury. Where Stonehenge is dynamic and alchemic and transformative and vroom, like this, Avebury is soothing and calming and kind of, more gentle. It won't take you up really, really fast. So the 2 sites are very different, but Avebury, you can touch the stones. You can have a picnic with your kids by a stone. You can have a free Druid festival, the 8 festival dates. They give free gatherings, so to speak. Or you could just do your own thing. You can just do what you like at Avebury. And I really like the fact that it is free, it is open, and you can take people there, and it's a really lovely place. But, with Avebury aside and Stonehenge aside, if we look to the surviving stone circles throughout the British Isles, then you've got over 1,000 stone circles.
Wow.
They are immense.
I had no idea that there were that many, because all you ever hear about is Stonehenge. You don't hear about these other places.
Exactly. And just surrounding Stonehenge alone, you've got, like I say, 17 miles away, as a crow flies, you have the world's largest stone circle. If you go to the west of Stonehenge, you have the second largest stone circle in the world, called Stanton Drew, which contains a very large circle, and 2 others as well. So we have this megalithic wonderland in England and throughout the British Isles. And each one has its own spirit of place. I mean, it's probably like when you go in your investigations, each place has a different vibe or energy. Right. Call it what you will. Well, stone circles are like that as well. Some are quite dark, some are very light, some are welcoming, some are go away. They all have their own identity that we can reach out to and try and form a relationship with.
Absolutely. So what's next for you?
What's next for me? Well, I'm already on my next book. I'm always writing books. I'll be going to Egypt in September. I'll be coming to America. I'll be leading a tour the last weekend of August to Chaco Canyon, for instance, with some colleagues of mine. And I'll also be in Colorado the week before. I think it's the 18th and the 19th, doing ancient civilizations with Gaia Gaia TV that's there. So I'm often in America actually doing research and speaking at different various events throughout the it's a huge country. Your country is just so huge that you could be in one part and I might not go to get to another part, you know.
Yeah, right, absolutely. How can people find you?
People can find me by going to my websites. I've got 3. I've got esotericcollege.com. I've got the Avebury or Avebury, Avebury, the Avebury experience.co.uk. If you can't remember any of those, just go to Murray or Wheatley.uk. I'm a Brit.
Fair enough. Well, I want to say, where can people get your books? Real quick.
Yes, again, go to the website. Really support authors by going to their websites, because in the UK, Amazon takes 60% of your take-ins. Even the Mob only took 35%.
Oh my gosh.
So we do try and say, you know, support authors and go to the websites direct would be a wondrous thing.
Absolutely. Maria, thank you so much for coming on. I learned so much talking with you. I'd love to get you back on in the future to talk more about stuff. This was just absolutely fascinating.
No, it's been a pleasure, and you've asked some amazing questions. So thank you for being a great hostess.
All right. You have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank
Cheerio.
you.
Bye.
Cheerio. All right. I learned a lot. I'm so fascinated by Stonehenge. I'm just, that whole area, I loved it. In fact, that's what I loved about going to England and going to Europe, period, was the history. I just love that stuff. Tomorrow we'll be back on our usual time, 6:30 p.m. Pacific, with medium Nancy Matz, and we're going to be talking about the movie Dead Again. So be ready for that at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. And again, I will get some information out about the classes I will be teaching for recruitment for the paranormal team, and that should be later on today, and I'll make sure I have that information for you guys tomorrow on the show. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a great rest of your day or evening, because some of you guys aren't going to be seeing or hearing this until the usual time at 6:30 tonight, right? Because this is because I went during the day. As you can tell, she's from England, so we had to shift the hours around. She's 8 hours ahead of us, so we were able to go live with her. But thank you guys very much for coming today, and I'll give you some of her contact information before I sign off. And let's do that real quick, and then we'll sign off and call it a day. So again, wrong thing. See, wrong book. I'm getting button happy here. Here we go. Websites: infinite-connections.co.uk, the Avebury experience.co.uk, and of course she gave you the her personal website. So okay, the books: The Essential Dowsing Guide, Avebury, Sun, Moon, and Earth, The Secret History of Stonehenge, Wiltshire, and My Squeaky Chair. And again, you can get those on her website. Okay? All right, guys. Well, I'm taking off, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We're equal opportunity here. Just try to get the word out about our show. I'll see you guys tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Pacific, with medium Nancy Matz. Have a great rest of your days, guys.